All right, well, it's 9 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Rise with Ice Miller and Friends. I'm Christina Fugate, and I'm joined here with my Ice Miller partner, Alice Kelly. And we're really excited that Jessica Murray and Morgan Kainth have joined us as well to talk all about B Corps. We're really excited about this topic, especially since we just got finished with Giving Tuesday. For those of you that have not joined us before for our Rise with Ice Miller and Friends webcast, these are a series of webcasts that we've been doing that gives us an opportunity to share the stories of our Ice Miller friends, to talk about how they've gotten to where they are, their businesses, and issues that we're all facing. And we have all of our prior episodes on our franchise webpage, so I encourage you to go check them out. Also, we want to keep this conversation very informal. So if you've got questions for our guest, don't hesitate to ask them. We've got a question and answer box that Alice and I will be keeping track of. So feel free to ask away. And we encourage you all to stay to the end of this program, as we've got a special drawing at the end for one of our live listeners. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alice. Alice, I think you're muted.
The phrase of the last 2 years, you're on mute. Good morning, I'm Alice Kelly. As Christina said, I'm an IP partner in our Chicago office, and we're really excited to welcome Jessica and Morgan this morning to talk about B Corp, something that I've been very interested in. I hope you are too. But before we get to them, we start with our couple poll questions. While you get up in the morning, except for Morgan, who's in the UK, what do you start with, coffee, tea, or something else? Tell you I have coffee.
Definitely a coffee drinker.
Oh wait, don't forget to hit submit. Well, while we wait for those, I'm going to introduce both of our guests. We have Jessica Murray of Tom's, which you might all be familiar with, the fabulous shoe company. And then we also have Morgan Kainth of Kin Carta, a technology company. She can explain their platform a little better. But I'm going to turn it over to both of them to tell us about themselves.
Hi, I'll start just because you said my name first. But I'm Jessica Murray. I work for Tom's Shoes, which is based in LA. It's about a 15-year-old company that started on the premise of our founder, Blake Mycoskie, who took a trip to Argentina and noticed that children were without shoes, and without shoes, they couldn't go to school. And so they would not be educated, and the cycle of poverty would continue. And so he came up with a notion, at the time was really new, was that for every shoe that he would sell, he would give a shoe to a child in need. And so Tom's currently has given over 500 million pairs of shoes. And over these years, we've got into coffee and eyewear with this belief that we should always be giving back. And I manage the IP portfolio, the brand protection, and all of the CSR. So how we make our products to make sure that they're also doing the best to improve lives and not leaving or attempting to reduce the impact.
Morgan?
Excuse the fact that I can't really speak. I'm recovering from a bit of a cold, not COVID, just a cold. My name's Morgan. I'm from an organization called Kin Carta. We are now officially the first publicly traded B Corp on the London Stock Exchange. We actually had a reception at the London Stock Exchange this morning to celebrate that fact, something that we achieved over the past couple of weeks across our group businesses. So we're super excited. You might think a technology company sounds slightly detached from the idea of benefit corporations or responsible business, but we really, in our hearts, are all builders. We're building the digital ways that we interact and we create our future. And so for us, it's super important to take that kind of sustainable and responsible messaging into everything that we do. And we're currently building out a sustainability platform as an organization that really looks at how we embed basically future-proofing into the platforms that we build, whether that's future-proofed for the people who use them, future-proofed for the planet, future-proof for our societies as well. So it's a really interesting time to be working in a tech company that's trying to do really good stuff.
Oh, thank you both. That's all very exciting. So both companies are certified B Corps, and if you could each tell us what that means in general, if there are any differences in the US or the UK, that would be great.
Morgan, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take that. So obviously this is a very recent certification for Kin Carta. We certified actually in the Americas first. So we have an Americas section, and that certification happened about a year ago. We then certified Europe earlier on this year, and the PLC, which was the last kind of structure to be B Corp certified very recently. The framework in and of itself is like globally aggregated, so there's no real difference in terms of the standards that you have to meet in order to achieve B Corp status. And really what it does is it cements your commitment to be a triple bottom line business. And what that means is that you are co-considering people and planet alongside the profit motives that you have, and that your organization exists for the benefit of all of its stakeholders, not just its shareholders. So those are the kind of fundamental principles of B Corp that detach it from, or I guess set it apart from doing the easy thing sometimes, right? Which is just making sure that you're pleasing a relatively small group of shareholders and focusing very specifically on generating the profits that can then sustain you financially as an organization. And it's a process that takes quite a long time. So oftentimes you submit your first kind of B Corp assessment. You then go into a pending status for a year. And then you reapply to ensure that you're still meeting those standards and you have all of the policies in place in order to support your kind of position as a benefit corporation.
For those of you who might be in this that don't really know what the process is, every company, in order to be even considered for status, must take an assessment. And that's about 420 questions that are a real holistic view of an organization. And the questions are geared towards industry, but they are rather overarching. And so it takes, I mean, I'll say for the first time I went through it, it took us about 4 to 6 months to really submit from the start of the assessment to the end. Any organization or business is able to do the assessment. It's open and free for all. And I think it's a fantastic tool, even for those who are thinking about it, but don't really know what will come of it. And I think it provides you with a really good temperature gauge of your organization, and also can set some really great goals for your organization as you kind of pivot towards that more sustainable business, purpose-minded organization. In order to become a B Corp, you must score at least 80 points out of 200. And again, that's just to be eligible. And then it's about, you have an audit review, and the B Corp will ask for certain documents. And once you are certified in that sense, that assessment, you get over an 80%. There's a few other steps to get to where you need to be in order to be certified. So for us, our first time around, we did it in 2018. And for Tom's, it was one of those things where everyone assumed that Tom's was B Corp, because it was kind of that organization that really started with purpose. And when we got around to doing the certification, it wasn't out of lack of interest. It was more, it's a commitment to do as an organization, to really sit there and because it's so holistic, you have to go through with so many different departments and really make it a priority from the top down. And so that just takes time. And so when we finally did it and we reached out to B Corp, they said, oh, finally, because every time we explain what a B Corp is, most companies, and this is at the time when it wasn't as relevant to so many businesses, Tom's was considered one of the only businesses that kind of had that purpose-driven purchase. And so we went through the assessment 3 years ago, and then the company went through organizational changes, and so we had to recertify this year. And so the recertification was equally painful, but at least we knew what we were getting into. But I guess one thing I would suggest is that anyone who's interested should at least try the assessment, because it's a really great tool just to even set your business up.
So I have a few questions on this process of becoming a B Corp. So first, what's the governing body that oversees the B Corp, and is it here in the United States or is it globally? Can you give us a little insight on that? Morgan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of like a franchise model. B Lab is a network of nonprofits, and those nonprofits sit in multiple different jurisdictions where benefit corporations, certified benefit corporations exist. Each of those franchises has its own leadership, so it's a kind of delegated leadership. But what's fundamentally the same across all of those things is the tool that you need to use in order to obtain that status. So though there's kind of a distributed model in terms of how B Lab itself runs and organizes itself, and then also is able to kind of ladder up feedback from different markets in order to continually inform and refine the questions that are being asked to make sure that they're relevant for all of the types of organizations that are applying and the diversity of organizations that are applying. It does kind of have a very strong set of standards that I think far surpass any of the other kind of ESG metrics or other ways that you might try and align your business to something beyond profit.
Got it. And you both talk about this assessment. Give us some insight into what this assessment is like. Is it all, answering online questions? Are there interviews? Kind of give us how that assessment works.
So it is a online assessment, and so you get a login and everything. You can go back many times, and then when you're ready to submit, you go through that submission, and so you go back to it quite often. Often it's multiple choice, so it's for example, how they talk about suppliers in our manufacturing, and so B Corp loves to see local suppliers. So there's a certain radius for manufacturing within your head office, and so you'll have A 10 miles, B 30 miles. So depending on your organization, that's a hard question to answer because it's a lot of transparency that you may or may not already have, and so each answer has a certain amount of points attributed to it, and so at the end that they come up with this point system. And so again, if you have over 80 or 80 or over, you qualify. And then the expectation as a B Corp certified company is that you recertify every 4 years, I believe, and you are expected to increase your score. So that's kind of the caveat there.
Got it. And Morgan, you talked about how this morning over in the UK you celebrated the certification. So give us an insight. Why did Kin Carta decide to go the B Corp route?
I think that's a really good question. As an organization, we actually have kind of recently come together as a collective of a lot of smaller technology companies and agencies. And one of the kind of defining parts of our coming together as an organization was really thinking about how we can level up in terms of sustainable and responsible and purpose-driven business. So it was an ambition of our CEO, Jay, to really think about how we can center responsible business in how we grow and how we move forward. Oftentimes, I think fast-growing organizations can let some of those deeply held principles perhaps fall by the wayside at scale. Unfortunately, that does just happen sometimes. And I think we as an organization were looking for a way to put those safeguards in place to make sure that we're continuously challenging ourselves to be better in the most rounded sense of the word. And yeah, our head of responsible business, Nick Zinzan, kind of met with the B Lab people. We decided it was the most rigorous and most challenging thing we could put ourselves through. And so, we're an ambitious organization. We chose to raise the bar for ourselves, and that's really why we tried to do that. I think also specifically as a digitally native organization. We think there's a real untapped visibility level on sustainable digital technology and sustainable digital transformation, which is going to become increasingly important as more things move online, right? So we really wanted to lead the way in that, and we think the best way to do that is to practice what we preach and become that responsible organization that can deliver responsible technology services across the world.
That's great. And Jessica, you mentioned when you saw the certification, they're like, finally, Tom's, we've, considered Tom's to be a B Corp business for a while. So why did Tom's finally make the decision to go down that route?
That's a very good question. I think it was more in order to help pave our sustainability journey. I think we knew as a corporation that we were really good in the giving and the social impact, but we needed help driving the other possible changes and impact, like environmental and employees and so forth. And so we felt as though this would give that structure, that it would allow us to set goals and kind of give that temperature gauge, but also provide us with something to reach for. And it really does provide structure. And, after we took the assessment, the assessment and all the scores are available to the public, and you can see all of our answers and where Tom, for example, scored highest, which was in community, and that's really because of our social giving, and less so in the environmental space. And so that really gave us the guardrails to really improve on that score and kind of put that as a priority for the next certification, but also as our business. So that really was the motivation. I think also there's just more of this conversation occurring in most companies and organizations right now. I think most people will always say, well, 80% of global consumers, they want to see businesses being more proactive in the impact of their businesses. Millennials, which is a big, and generation, is it Z or X? I forget which one we're on at this point, but this is really the target for Tom's, and that is they're driving these questions and really want to see more of this from organizations, and they want transparency. And so for us, we knew we were doing great things, but there were certain things we knew we needed to improve on. So it allowed us to do so. Consultants can be expensive too, so we felt this was a good start to our first step into this.
Great. Have you found that getting the certification has been good for the overall bottom line, financially, but also with employee morale and attracting talent?
Yes, we have at Tom's. It's been really inspirational to see how many employees have resonated with this platform. There's something called the Beehive, which is accessible to all employees of B Corp certified companies, and it allows you to build a community within your employee base. And so you connect with other B Corp. It's a great resource for both HR and employees. And so, and that was really surprising how many of the Tom's employees really loved that partnership. Before COVID, there's a lot of conversations and meetings and events that were organized around B Corp certification companies in different industries. I think currently there's 2,300 B Corp certified companies in 150 industries in 55 countries. So you have this amazing network to it. So that has been a huge positive.
What about you, Morgan?
Yeah, I would echo that, right? I think being a purpose-driven organization that can kind of put their money where their mouth is about these things and is really prioritizing continuous improvement in this area is very, very attractive from an employee value proposition perspective. Generally, people want to work for an organization that they feel good about working for. And I think centering purpose and having a really well-rounded view around how we treat our people, how we work with our communities, how we treat the environment, how we work with our stakeholders, and all of the governance frameworks that wrap up our organization gives that level of clarity to current employees and also future employees, right? We have a huge amount of interest in doing more purpose-driven work, and to us that can look probably quite different to something that's slightly more direct. You know, for us it could be looking at a big corporate website that has millions of visitors every month and finding a way to reduce the data transfer that's required in order to load that web page. Because if that's being visited millions of times every month, then that's a lot of data, and data is energy and energy is carbon. And so we're really kind of looking at intelligent ways where we can do what we do, but better. And I think that's a really attractive proposition for employees and from a customer perspective as well. I think because we're working with large corporate organizations, many of them do have their own CSR and sustainability agendas, and being able to leverage consultancy services from an organization that is certified and that does practice what it preaches, I think gives them a lot of comfort that they're in safe hands when they're thinking about how they tie their business strategy to their sustainability strategy in a much more holistic way.
Have you had to do much reorganization or creation of jobs to, funnel the B Corp status? And, it sounds like this network is a great, collaborative environment to build on your B Corp status. Have you found that you've had to staff that with somebody internally to be the manager of your process?
Yeah, so in our case, we have a head of responsible business, and we had a head of responsible business before, and we even embarked on this journey. But I think what B Corp has done, and actually what going through the assessment for the first time did, was really show us how we needed to level up in different areas. So we have launched like an idea program, which is focused on inclusion, diversity, equity, and awareness. And we now have someone full-time in that role, really driving that program forward to make sure that we are providing kind of a best place to work for our employees. That's a very key part of B Corp. What we've not done as an organization is land the responsibility of the process on one person, but what we have done is taken aspects of the process and divided up responsibilities that we think provide like enriching value to our organization. And that is tied to some of the B Corp requirements as well. So it's actually been job creation, and lots of very keen people within our organization have been able to step into those roles either part-time or full-time. So it's created a lot of opportunities for our people as well.
What about you, Jessica?
So similar to Morgan, there has not been an increase in staffing unfortunately, to help with the B Corp process. But what has occurred is that the B Corp goals have been incorporated in different departments as their own goals and kind of provide us with guiding lights. So that is something very positive, because I think for Tom's, what we liked about B Corp, it is very holistic. It's not just set on one particular department. So many certifications will occur in manufacturing will occur at your supply chain level. And so your supply chain is certified, but then the rest of the business may or may not be involved with that particular aspect. And so B Corp really brings it all together and makes everyone hold a piece of that pie. And so when creating goals for the organization and strategic goals for the next few years, B Corp was that guiding light. So it's really provided that structure that we needed.
Great. And you mentioned that it is good for business and, especially millennials and Gen Z. I don't know what comes after Gen Z, but consumer-wise, is that something you've been tracking as as being a B Corp? Something that draws consumers to your products and services, or have you identified the demographic that really it appeals to?
So for Tom's, it really was an expectation that Tom's was already a B Corp. So for us, it just helped meet that requirement. And we became a lot more transparent, which is something that as consumers, they wanted to see more. You know, we get a lot of questions about our giving. And so that was something that by doing this B Corp, it provided kind of a stamp of approval from a third party and allowed to have more of that certification into our business. So I think that provided a lot more trust. And then, like I mentioned, the assessment is made public. And so that in itself allows consumers to go and review, you know, areas of strengths and weaknesses. And so I think it's that more than anything, that allows consumers to build that trust, is the transparency that organizations provide within their business and their supply chain. And that's something at Tom's that we've really been working through the last few years and has resonated well. As far as the actual revenue stream that is generated from that, I'm not sure that's an easy calculation from our perspective, but it is something that we feel echoes well with our consumers.
What about you, Morgan?
I think it's quite interesting for us specifically. Generally, we tend to contract with big corporates who have all kind of very ambitious startups that have kind of big technology programs of work that they need us to support with or transform or improve. And as I said a little bit earlier on, I think the area that we're working in where we can drive like real change and make sure that we're aligning to all of those principles of B Corp, still very emergent. So it's still a space where there's not very much coverage. I would say, obviously, it's great to have that third-party certification that we're not just talking about it, we are doing it. And I think that supports kind of a lot of our messaging, a lot of our brand and the way that we want to put ourselves out into the world with something that's tangible and concrete. But there's also, I think, in terms of how we do business, the knowledge about B Corps, what they mean, and also generally this idea of integrating some of these kind of community and planetary aspects fundamentally into your business model, rather than seeing them as siloed things that happen alongside business as usual, is still very new for them. And I think, you know, proving that it works and proving that you can be a financially very successful business, like a Tom's, like a K&C, while still holding those principles very strongly, I think is a very compelling reason, especially for startups, to want to work with organizations and partner.
That's great. So if you remember, we had a poll at the very beginning of our webcast, and it looks like, just for you that are curious, we've got majority coffee drinkers. I think everyone that responded said they are coffee drinkers, so that's great. But we have another poll too that we want to share. Kristen, if you want to put that up. So how many businesses across the world have a B Corp certification? We've got some choices there, so we'll let everyone respond.
I think the answer was said earlier, so it'll be a test of if you listened.
You're right about that. So while everyone's doing that, we'll go to our next question. And so Morgan and Jessica, you both have been very successful at your organizations and have a successful career. And we've talked about how your organizations, you know, achieving the B Corp status is in part to retain and engage new employees. And I'm curious, what keeps you, or what made you decide to join your organization, and what keeps you there? Morgan, do you want to start?
Sure. So I joined before when kind of B Corp was still a twinkle in everyone's eye. But what I did see was an ambition, like a very clear ambition, for the organization to do digital differently. And that was what was really inspiring to me. I think working in an organization that always looks forward, in terms of the technologies that we're implementing, in terms of what we're doing, it would be remiss of an organization to not then also think about the impact on people and planet of what that does. And I think those values that are obviously shared by B Corp, and something that we obviously pledge to uphold through our work, having become certified, is like, you know, music to my ears, I guess, as someone who actually transferred into technology from the not-for-profit sector. So it's a really great way of feeling like you're moving industry, but without losing the core of what it is that kind of drives you and gets you up in the morning.
That's great. Jessica, what about you?
Yes, I would agree with Morgan. I think I had the opposite though. I was in fashion and luxury world, and although very fun and wonderful for its many perks, it was a nice change to go to a company that was based on doing good. And I've been with Tom's now over, I think it's almost 9 years, and so it's been a hard process in many ways because there's been so many changes within the organization, and the B Corp has been really exciting, but it sometimes in many ways still feels like a startup. But everyone is motivated by passion, and I think that's a lovely thing. Everyone's in it together to do good, and that's a wonderful feeling. So it's been positive in that aspect, and it makes, you still have the same issues in any other organization, but and passion can be also when I first started was interesting because everyone just wanted to do good, and so passion can lead to very heated emotional responses. So kind of working through that, but knowing that everyone is there to with that common goal is lovely.
Right. So a couple months ago, I read an article in, I think it was in Fortune magazine, and it talked about the number of companies attempting to obtain the B Corp status during the COVID pandemic has increased significantly. Do either of you have some thoughts as to why we're seeing such a shift and such an increase in companies wanting to become certified? Jessica, do you want to take this one first?
I think it goes to this idea that it's no longer seen as a nice to have, and many corporations are being asked some difficult questions about their organization, and B Corp's a great way to start, and put up those guardrails and really go down that journey. I know that from conversations I've had with B Corp recently, they said a lot of startups prefer to start with B Corp instead of, as Tom said, just kind of certifying later on, so that their business is based on a good base. And so that's really encouraging. I think when Tom's first started, it was a revolutionary idea. I would say it's much less so now. This idea of giving back it's fantastic, and it's still not done by all, but it is really not as exciting for companies to be doing this. B Corp is that next level, but it's a demand that many consumers, and I think mostly in Europe too, it's being driven by the European consumer, are much more advanced than we are in the US in regards to this, and asking some really difficult questions. And I know that for Tom's, we get most of our sustainability platforms derived from the European consumers who are asking the questions regarding, things that we haven't started thinking about. So I'm sure Morgan knows much more about that than I do, but it's been really interesting to see kind of this growth in that space regarding businesses who just are going forward and trying to do better from the start rather than kind of catching up later.
Morgan, do you have any thoughts on the acceleration?
Yeah, I mean, totally echo that point around startups. And actually, my first interaction with B Corp was in setting up a tech company that wanted to be a B Corp from day one. So I've been through the assessment with 2 startups, and then obviously now Kin Carta is a legacy organization, which is much trickier. Setting yourself up as a B Corp where you have all of the policies in place just makes life so much easier. It's baked into your DNA. Retrofitting obviously always takes a bit longer, and there's a lot that you need to unravel and think about that you don't bake into your processes and systems that are pre-existing. I guess in terms of the kind of influx of interest, that there's some of those kind of pull factors like consumer curiosity and wanting to kind of keep up with being basically an elite version of a good business, right? Which is what a B Corp is. Though the ambition is that all organizations can at least meet that minimum benchmark. All organizations should be able to behave in the way that B Corp demands that we do. There are also some, I guess, pandemic specific factors, right? Lots of supply chains were disrupted, which means you could actually take that time to zoom out and reflect on how you can improve them, and not just improve them for efficiency, but also improve them in terms of planetary impact. That could trigger you to think about B Corp. The impact of COVID on our communities, the detachment, the changes in ways of working, all of those disruptions actually provide organizations with an opportunity to reflect, to reset themselves, and to set those new ambitions to move forward. And yeah, I think also just the climate conversation that is obviously increasing and getting rightly noisier by the day. It does just mean that organizations are really thinking now about what they can do as much as what they can talk about, which I think has been the previous narrative.
That's very insightful. I think the big takeaway I'm getting from today's discussion is that just going through the questionnaire, whether you're an established or company or startup, is just a really great way to either start your business or gut check what you're doing. And especially for startups, because they're always they're at a loss and they don't have an in-house legal team telling them what to do. So that's a really great piece, I think, for our listeners and for anybody who you would talk about. So now I feel very knowledgeable talking about B Corps. I think right now we all hear about the Great Resignation. At least I hear about it. I don't know if I've seen it so much, but we're all looking for that secret sauce on retention and attracting talent. Is the B Corp something that is instrumental in that, or do you feel like it's becoming, more of a baseline that employees are expecting to work at a good place?
I'll take that.
It's a good question, right? Like, for us, our employee value proposition is something that we're working on at the moment. And definitely the kind of responsibility platform is a big part of that. I think just in the same way as we were saying earlier around millennial and Gen Z consumers really wanting to embrace a more responsible and purposeful way of doing things, I think that also applies to how the kind of emerging talent want to work. But that's not to say that only young people care about purpose. That's nonsense, right? I think it applies across the board. And I think if the option were available previously to have this certification and use it and leverage it and prove that you're a purposeful organization, it would be a differentiating value proposition for sure. I mean, the tech sector is running real hot right now. Like lots of people are moving, lots of people are capitalizing on the fact that the need for digital skills is increasing. And so I think being able to stand apart from our competition for talent on a responsibility platform is really attractive for people.
I think also, if I remember correctly, B Corp told me that 80% of people who work at a B Corp company their next job will be within a B Corp company, which I always found really interesting, which shows really the motivation in regards to kind of that the acquisition and retention that I think you're asking about, Alex. I think it's an important part of employees. And I didn't realize how impactful it was for organizations that may not have this as part of their DNA. But I do think that part of being B Corp certified is that you have to take care of your employees and meet certain benchmarks. And so that standard is high. And I think that provides a lot of comfort for employees. And so that is also a tremendous benefit.
I would just add a really small point, sorry, that, the B Corp certification, as Jessica said, kind of quite early doors, that the expectation is that your score will increase over time, right? So what it does is it almost sets your bar at a very distinct level that is higher than most, but not perfect. But at least you've got a kind of floor to the level of expectation that you're putting on, right? So obviously we have to treat our people really well, and there are aspects of the questionnaire that speak to that specifically. But we can always do more, and I think that's what's so inspiring if you're looking at joining an organisation that has B Corp status is first of all the fact that your baseline's high, but also that there's ambition behind that, because B Corp organisations are constantly looking to challenge themselves and improve across all of those areas.
And so for us in the US who, for example, paid time off is not something that is we're known for. An example of question on the B Corp assessment is how many holidays do you give to your employees? And so, like I said, every answer has a certain amount of points, and the highest score is, in Tom's case, was we were missing it by 1 day. And so the company decided that, they would give that day because it seemed that was that's the best standard as an organization, and that's what we should be doing, and we should be giving that. So they gave everyone a floating holiday. And there's been other type of employee benefits that come out of it. So that's just a small example of something that in the US, like, it really helps set that standard. And so that's just for the starting employee, and then you build your holidays through tenure. But in organizations, sometimes that's a very low bar within the US. So things like that are really are great.
Yes, we're a little stingy with our paid time off in the US. So interesting, B Corps obviously are going to face their own set of challenges with your processes. I'm curious, what do you think are your general challenges, and how has that been shifted or exacerbated with our almost 2 years in a pandemic?
I'll take that, just because as a manufacturing company, it's an exceptional challenge right now. I think most of us hear it on the news, even if you're not working in manufacturing. It's been a challenge. I don't think it's over. I think we're going to continue feeling this for quite a while. I would love to see our assessment improve the next time we will recertify in certain areas in the supply chain, because that's something that when you are in manufacturing, especially, Tom's is relatively small compared to some of the footwear industry giants. And so you have less control of certain aspects of your supply chain. We're dependent on others to, for example, for shipments and manufacturing. We own a percentage of the line in a factory. We don't have the ability to have full capacity factories just based on our size. And so you kind of take a back seat. And so we're pushing our factories to do better and to improve on certain aspects, but they're not going to be as motivated right now to do that, because they're trying to make up for lost revenue, and there's certain other corporations that will be paying them more to do more volume and to do it quickly, and may not be as will be more flexible in their approach to their supply chain and manufacturing. So it's really something that I feel we have to go in together, and that's kind of how, even in manufacturing, we look for companies who are manufacturing with the similar standards as Tom's. We're also going through the Fair Labor Organization accreditation process, which is a real deep dive into supply chain. And that really kind of sets standards. And we try to look for factories to manufacture together, so we know that standard is already really high. But that's sometimes a harder sell to our board of directors, who has really embraced us and this the B Corp and this FLA, and they really are pushing that. But I could see how in other organizations those types of challenges may become really difficult. And without the B Corp, without those kind of top level down goals, it becomes much more difficult to fulfill on those requirements. So it's a challenge, but I think we're all committed to making the best products and or in the best way. And I would say that most people who are on organizations that are in it with us are doing that as well, but many aren't as well. So.
Yeah, I think echo that, but I guess put a digital lens on it, right? I think that the core challenge of a B Corp is we've now got to juggle more priorities that we've decided to prioritize with equal weight, rather than just pursuing a kind of straightforward profit-based business model and business strategy. We're now looking at those trade-offs to people and planet as equals in terms of carrying kind of weight of decision making. It's an interesting one, and I think how we select partners, how we work with clients, the kind of clients that we take on, that's all shifted because of the B Corp stuff, and we're very lucky that we're working in a fast-growing industry, that actually it means that the work hasn't dried up just because our bars got higher. Actually, it's opened up lots of really interesting opportunities for us, but it might not always be that way. So we need to, I guess that the challenge is that sometimes you have to make what would be considered a bad business decision from a pure profit perspective because you're doing the right thing and you're trying to do it right. And so I think, it's not a challenge that we should sweat too much. It's a challenge we should be really proud to face, but it definitely does put an additional lens on things.
Yeah, that's great. And I just remind everyone as we're getting near the end of the hour, feel free to ask questions if you've got some of your own. But I want to switch gears a little bit to a more personal question. During this time of the pandemic, many of us, I think, have started maybe some new habits or doing something to keep us happy and healthy. And just curious if you have started anything new or what you both of you do to keep happy and to keep healthy. Jessica, do you want to start?
I took up tennis, which I've never played in my life, which was really interesting to learn a sport later on in life. And I have so far not injured myself, which is even more miraculous. But it's been nice that, I live in Miami, so that allows me to play outside, and it's nice with having been in lockdown, although Florida has been relatively open compared to many parts of the world. But it's been a nice thing to learn and try to recruit people who would play with me.
That's fun. I played tennis growing up and still play to this day. And I read something that in 2020 during the pandemic, I think there was a 300 increase of the number of players with tennis, just because it was found to be a sport that people could do without having a fear of getting the virus. So I found that really, really interesting. That tennis is really.
I'm not sure I'm ready to play you though.
She's being modest. She was all American. So
yeah, I had a feeling she was holding back.
Morgan, what about you?
Well, I kind of picked up a way less sociable habit, which is running. And yeah, I picked it up maybe in September, so after the first lockdown that happened in London, and we were all kind of allowed out again for the summer, and then it all got bad again, so we went back inside. Yeah, I just took it up as someone who hadn't run for sort of 6 or 7 years. And I challenged myself in 2021 to run 1,001 miles, because last year my brother ran 1,000, so I just wanted to beat him by 1. And I'm ahead of schedule on that this year, so yeah, it's great. And that, and also just getting outside in general, I think has been really energizing, especially in the winter when it's cold all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great 1,001 miles. That's a lot. Good for you.
a lot. I love the competition with the brother.
Oh yeah, I asked him at Christmas last year, whether he was going to do it again this year. He was like, oh, I don't know. I was like, I could probably beat you. He was like, how much by? I was like, I don't know. I'll do 1,001. I'm not going to stop. So yeah.
So is there, besides health habits, is there anything you changed or altered or that was forced upon you that you think you'd like to keep after the pandemic?
Well, I feel like we see much more of each other in many ways. I'm not sure, and I don't know how long that you guys have been doing these types of forums, but this is a great initiative to be able to partake and connect people through different industries and organizations. And I'm not sure if you had done it pre-COVID, Alice. No. So I think things like this are great. I mean, Zoom calls have really picked up.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this was something that we started during COVID as exactly that, just a way to kind of get people together and in a more lighthearted way. So yeah, this is great. Morgan, what about you?
Yeah, no, completely agree on the kind of like digital meeting spaces stuff. I think it's you have less of an excuse not to stretch your mind a little bit, which I think is really nice. There's always a reason to not leave the house, but if you don't have to leave the house to do something, then you know, you can engage much more easily, much more readily. I would say one thing that I'm really enjoying now that, you know, we're able to come back into the office is actually actively collaborating with people. I think that so like the events and meeting people, I think is so brilliant online, but there's that kind of deep collaboration that I think really does just come alive in person. So working out how to do that in a hybrid fashion has been really interesting, really challenging. I think we're nailing it now, 2 years in, but that's really nice as well. Some of the amazing tools as well and softwares that we started using, want to keep them anyway.
I don't want to keep having every single call be a video call. I don't, I'm like, this doesn't need to be a video. We can just chat. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really just interesting and edifying. I'm really excited to learn more about B Corps and suggest it to people. So we have a drawing at the end for a free Chicago flag. I'm kidding. Okay, my husband makes these and I've got them coming out of my ears. So, but what we really do is have a Tom's gift card, and our winner is Steve Martin, if you're on the call. So you will be contacted by Kristen Fauser and she will get you the gift card. So, did you have any other questions?
I don't see any in our question box. Well, Jessica and Morgan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This was great.
It really was.
I guess this afternoon for you, Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah, this afternoon. It's nearly 3 p.m, so I'm a bit ahead of you guys. But no, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Well, have a great day, everyone, or evening, wherever you may be.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.